The emergency session had been going for 3 hours, and nobody had any good answers. Representatives from 40 different species sat in the Grand Council chamber, their voices rising in panic as reports kept flooding in. The collective had just taken another system, their 48th conquest in less than 3 months. Admiral Torrens from the Vahari Concordat slammed his appendage against the table, demanding immediate action. "We must surrender before they destroy us all," a small reptilian delegate hissed from the back row. Several others nodded in agreement, their fear visible across different alien physiologies. The collective's fleet had already proven unstoppable, crushing every defensive force that dared to oppose them. Their tactics were brutal and efficient, leaving no room for negotiation or mercy. Near the back of the chamber, Ambassador Richard Hayes from Earth sat quietly, observing the chaos with calm eyes. He had said nothing during the entire session, content to watch as various species proposed increasingly desperate solutions. Some wanted to flee to unexplored regions of space. Others suggested offering tribute in exchange for survival. None of these ideas would work, and Hayes knew it. A sudden alarm blared through the chamber, cutting off all conversation. The holographic display at the center flickered to life, showing dozens of ships emerging from hyperspace just outside the station. The collective had arrived. Their vessels were dark and angular, designed to inspire fear as much as to fight. The largest ship, a dreadnought 3 kilometers long, moved to the front of the formation. "Attention Council Station," a harsh voice echoed through every speaker in the chamber. "This is Commander Vrath of the Collective Armada. You have 1 hour to discuss terms of your surrender. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of this station and everyone aboard. We are inevitable. We are unstoppable. Choose wisely." Panic erupted immediately. Delegates shouted over each other, some demanding evacuation while others prepared to accept whatever terms the collective offered. The chamber descended into complete disorder as species representatives abandoned all pretense of diplomatic composure. Security officers struggled to maintain even basic order. Ambassador Hayes finally stood up, his movement so casual that few noticed at first. He walked to the center of the chamber. Standing beside the holographic display of the collective fleet, when he spoke, his voice was quiet, yet somehow it cut through all the noise. "There is another option." Everyone fell silent, staring at the human representative. "Earth can handle this situation," Hayes continued, his tone matter-of-fact. Several delegates laughed, thinking it was a joke. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as decent traders and surprisingly good diplomats, but nobody considered them a military power. Earth had been part of the galactic community for 60 years and had never shown any significant combat capability. "With respect, Ambassador," Admiral Torrens said carefully, "Earth has no fleet that could challenge even one collective cruiser, let alone their entire armada. Perhaps it would be better if—" Hayes raised his hand, cutting off the Admiral mid-sentence. "We've been preparing for a situation like this for 40 years, he said simply. He pulled out a small communication device and entered a short sequence of codes. "I'm sending a message to our deep space installations. They'll respond shortly." Commander Vrath's image appeared on the holographic display, his face twisted in amusement. "The humans think they can save you. How entertaining. Very well, I will give you 6 hours instead of 1. Let us see what pathetic force Earth can muster. It will make our victory that much sweeter." The transmission cut off, and the collective fleet maintained its position. The council chamber filled with whispers and worried glances. Most species thought Hayes had just bought them a few extra hours before the inevitable. Some were angry that he had potentially provoked the collective into a harsher response. Hayes ignored all of them, standing calmly as he waited for a reply to his message. 4 minutes later, his device chirped. Hayes read the message, nodded once, and looked up at the assembled delegates. "Earth Defense Initiative is responding," he announced. "They'll be here in approximately 5 hours and 40 minutes. I suggest everyone remain calm and prepare for what comes next." "What comes next is our destruction," someone muttered from the crowd. Hayes allowed himself a small smile but said nothing more. He had learned long ago that some things needed to be seen to be believed. Earth had spent decades building something unprecedented while maintaining a carefully constructed image of weakness. The galaxy was about to learn why. As the hours ticked by, tension in the chamber reached unbearable levels. Some delegates tried to leave, but the collective had surrounded the station, making escape impossible. Others attempted to open private communications with Commander Vrath, hoping to negotiate separate deals. Hayes simply waited, checking his device occasionally. When the 5-hour mark passed, every sensor in the system suddenly lit up. Something was approaching, something that made the collective's dreadnought look like a toy. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the station's instruments could properly measure. Space itself seemed to ripple and tear as something massive forced its way into normal space. "What is that?" Admiral Torrens breathed, staring at his personal scanner in disbelief. The readings made no sense. Nothing could be that large and still function. Yet the sensors didn't lie. Something 15 kilometers long was emerging from hyperspace, its energy signature dwarfing the entire collective fleet combined. The holographic display struggled to render the vessel's full size. It kept adjusting the scale, trying to fit the enormous ship into its projection field. Finally, the image stabilized, showing a vessel that redefined what the galaxy thought possible. The Supercarrier Horizon's Edge had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The thing that emerged from hyperspace defied every principle of ship design the galaxy had established over millions of years. Horizon's Edge stretched 15 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull covered in thousands of launch bays and weapon emplacements. Rotating sections spun slowly along its length, generating artificial gravity for the crew inside. The supercarrier's presence made every other vessel in the system look insignificant. Commander Vrath stared at his tactical display, his confidence wavering for the first time in years. His dreadnought, the pride of the collective fleet, measured 3 kilometers long. This human vessel was 5 times that size. His sensors reported power readings that shouldn't be possible. The ship had multiple fusion cores, each generating enough energy to power a small planet. "This must be a trick," Vrath muttered to his tactical officer. "Some kind of hologram designed to scare us. Scan for projector sources." His officer worked frantically but found nothing. The vessel was absolutely real, solid matter, displacing space itself. Mass readings confirmed it weighed more than his entire fleet combined. A transmission came through, clear and calm. "This is Captain Andrews of the Earth Defense Initiative vessel Horizon's Edge. Commander Vrath, you are ordered to withdraw your fleet immediately. This is your only warning." The voice carried no anger, no fear, just professional certainty. It was the tone of someone who knew exactly how this situation would end. Vrath's pride flared. "You think one oversized ship can defeat my entire armada? We have 50 vessels, each crewed by the finest warriors the collective has produced. Your bulk makes you an easy target, human. I will enjoy watching your ridiculous ship break apart." He signaled his fleet to assume attack formation. In the council chamber, delegates watched in horrified fascination as the collective fleet maneuvered around Horizon's Edge. The supercarrier didn't move, didn't even adjust its position. It simply hung in space like a mountain, immovable and unconcerned. Launch bays along its hull began to open, revealing row after row of fighter craft. "All ships open fire," Vrath commanded. 50 collective vessels unleashed everything they had. Plasma torpedoes streaked through space by the hundreds. Kinetic rounds accelerated to incredible speeds. Energy beams lanced out from dozens of weapons arrays. The combined firepower could have destroyed a moon. Horizon's Edge activated its point defense network. Thousands of small turrets emerged from the hull, tracking incoming fire with perfect precision. Automated systems calculated trajectories in microseconds, intercepting threats before they could reach the carrier. The space around the ship lit up like a fireworks display as weapons were destroyed mid-flight. The few shots that made it through the point defense hit energy barriers that shimmered into visibility on impact. The barriers absorbed the strikes effortlessly, dissipating energy across their entire surface. Not a single shot reached the actual hull. The collective's full assault had accomplished nothing. Impossible, Vrath whispered, watching his tactical display in disbelief. His fleet had just thrown enough firepower to conquer a solar system, and the human ship hadn't even taken damage. All ships focus fire on Sector 7, overwhelm their defenses through concentration. The fleet adjusted, pouring everything into one small section of the carrier. Horizon's edge simply rotated, presenting a fresh section of hull to the incoming fire. The damaged shields withdrew behind intact armor while new barriers took their place. Small repair drones emerged from maintenance bays, already working on the minor scoring the first assault had caused. The ship fought like it was alive, adapting to threats in real time. Captain Andrews' voice came through again, still calm and professional. "Commander, you're wasting lives for nothing. Stand down now, and I guarantee safe passage out of this system for your entire fleet. Continue fighting, and I will be forced to disable your vessels. The choice is yours." Vrath slammed his fist against his command console. "Never. All fighters launch. Suicide runs on their launch bays, bombers target their engines. We will find a weakness." Hundreds of small craft poured from the collective ships, racing toward Horizon's edge with reckless abandon. The supercarrier's fighter wings launched in response. Human pilots in sleek craft intercepted the collective attackers halfway. The engagement that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human fighters moved with impossible precision, their pilots using tactics that seemed to predict enemy movements before they happened. Each human craft was equipped with AI-assisted targeting systems that worked in harmony with the pilot's instincts. They used debris as cover, coordinated attacks from multiple angles, and executed maneuvers that shouldn't be survivable. Collective pilots, trained in straightforward combat, found themselves completely outmatched. Within minutes, half their fighter force was disabled or destroyed. The bombers that made it through faced the point defense network up close. It was like flying into a wall of fire. Automated turrets tracked multiple targets simultaneously, creating an impenetrable barrier around the carrier. A handful of bombers reached the hull, but their explosives barely scratched the armor plating. In the council chamber, species that had faced the collective and lost watched in amazement. "How did humans develop this?" Admiral Torrens asked Ambassador Hayes. "Your people have been part of the galactic community for 60 years. We thought we knew your capabilities." Hayes smiled slightly. "We learned from watching the rest of you. We saw how militaristic species became threats or targets. We chose to appear weak. While we prepared, humanity spent 40 years building 3 of these carriers in the outer reaches of our solar system. We kept them hidden, waiting for the day we'd need them." On Horizon's edge, Captain Andrews watched the tactical display as the collective fleet began showing signs of disorder. Their commander was finally realizing the truth. "All weapon systems active status," Andrews ordered. "Let's show them what we can really do." Rail cannons emerged from the supercarrier's hull, their barrels longer than most frigates. Commander Vrath received damage reports from across his fleet. 30% of his fighters gone, multiple ships showing critical damage, and they still hadn't scratched the human vessel. Pride warred with survival instinct. He could order a full retreat, or he could commit to one final, desperate assault. His pride won. "All ships prepare for final attack run. We will break them or die trying." It was the last mistake he would ever make. The collective fleet charged forward in one massive formation, every remaining ship committed to a final desperate assault. Commander Vrath had abandoned all tactical thinking, replacing strategy with raw aggression. His vessels formed a spearhead aimed directly at Horizon's edge. Engines pushed beyond safe limits. It was a move born of wounded pride rather than military wisdom. Captain Andrews watched the formation approach and felt something close to sadness. These beings were throwing their lives away for nothing. Tactical, prepare firing solution, target their engines and weapon systems only. We disable, not destroy. His crew responded with practiced efficiency. Nobody on Horizon's edge wanted unnecessary death. The supercarrier's rail cannons fired their first salvo. Tungsten rounds accelerated to a fraction of light speed, crossing the distance between ships in heartbeats. Each shot had been calculated with inhuman precision, targeting specific systems on specific vessels. The rounds punched through shields like they didn't exist, smashing into engine compartments and weapon arrays. 3 collective cruisers went dark immediately, their power systems crippled. 2 more lost maneuvering control, spinning helplessly through space. A destroyer's weapons exploded internally, the detonation contained by its own armor but devastating to the crew inside. Within 10 seconds of firing, the human carrier had crippled 6 enemy vessels. Vrath watched his fleet fall apart and felt ice in his veins. This wasn't combat. This was execution. The humans were surgically dismantling his armada, choosing exactly what damage to inflict. They could have destroyed his ships completely, killed everyone aboard. Instead, they were methodically removing the collective's ability to fight. All ships evasive maneuvers, Vrath ordered, but it was too late. The humans had already calculated every possible trajectory. The rail cannons fired again, and 3 more ships lost propulsion. A frigate's entire weapon deck shattered under kinetic impact. Another cruiser's shields collapsed, leaving it defenseless. The collective fleet was being taken apart piece by piece. In his desperation, Vrath made a choice that would haunt him. "Activate the planet killer," he commanded. His tactical officer turned pale. "Commander, that weapon was meant for planetary bombardment, using it on a ship, especially here near the station." Vrath cut him off with a gesture. "Activate it now." The flagship's main weapon began charging, drawing power from every available system. It was a massive energy projector designed to crack tectonic plates and boil oceans. The collective had used it 3 times in their conquest, each time rendering a world uninhabitable. Now Vrath would use it against the humans, consequences be damned. Sensors across the system detected the energy buildup. On Horizon's edge, alarms blared as tactical computers recognized the weapon's signature. "Captain, they're charging a planetary bombardment cannon." Andrew's expression hardened. "How long to full charge?" His tactical officer checked the readings. 90 seconds, sir. At this range, if they fire toward us and miss, the beam will hit the council station." Andrews didn't hesitate. "Target their weapon array. Maximum power. Fire when ready." The Supercarrier's main mass driver, a weapon system designed to redirect asteroids, swiveled toward the collective flagship. It was a massive rail cannon that ran nearly half the length of Horizon's edge, capable of accelerating projectiles to speeds that made conventional rounds look stationary. The weapon charged for 5 seconds, drawing enough power to dim lights throughout the carrier. Then it fired. A single tungsten penetrator weighing 50 tons accelerated to 12% of light speed. The round crossed the distance between ships faster than sensors could track. One moment it was leaving Horizon's edge, the next it had arrived. The penetrator hit the flagship's charging weapon dead center. The impact was catastrophic. Stored energy meant for planetary destruction released all at once inside the ship itself. The flagship's entire forward section exploded outward in a bloom of superheated plasma. Secondary explosions ripped through the vessel as power systems overloaded. The mighty dreadnought began breaking apart. "Launch all rescue pods," Andrews ordered immediately. "I want every survivor pulled from that ship. Move." Human rescue craft shot from Horizon's edge before the flagship had even finished exploding. They raced through debris fields, scanning for life signs, every escape pod, every section of hull with survivors, every damaged lifeboat received immediate assistance. The remaining collective ships watched in confusion as their enemy saved the lives of beings who had just tried to kill them. Human crews risked their own safety to pull survivors from wreckage. Medical teams prepared to receive wounded from every species in the collective fleet. It made no tactical sense. Victorious warriors were supposed to finish their enemies, not rescue them. "Why are they saving us?" someone whispered on one of the collective cruisers. The acting commander, who had taken over after Vrath's death, stared at the display showing human rescue operations. These beings had just demonstrated overwhelming military superiority. They could easily destroy what remained of the fleet. Instead, they were spending resources to preserve collective lives. The acting commander made a decision Vrath's pride would never have allowed. All ships, power down weapons and shields, send a message to the human vessel. We surrender. It was the first time in collective history that an invasion force had completely surrendered. But then, it was the first time they had faced an enemy who fought to protect rather than conquer. Captain Andrews received the surrender and nodded to himself. Acknowledge their surrender. Have our fighters escort them to the designated holding area. Medical teams stand ready to assist with any wounded. He opened a channel to the council station. Ambassador Hayes, the situation is resolved. No further threat to the station or its inhabitants. In the council chamber, silence reigned. Delegates stared at the tactical displays showing human. Crews working alongside collective survivors. Species that had been enemies minutes ago were now receiving medical treatment side by side in Horizon's Edge's medical bays. It was unprecedented. It was impossible. It was completely, uniquely human. Admiral Torrens turned to Ambassador Hayes. Your people could have destroyed them all. Why show mercy to an enemy that showed none? Hayes met his gaze steadily. Because we fight to protect, not to kill. We built these carriers to defend the weak, not to dominate the strong. That's the difference between us and them. The implications of that statement rippled through the chamber. Earth possessed overwhelming military power but chose to exercise restraint. They could have revealed these vessels years ago and dominated galactic politics. Instead, they waited, watching, preparing to act only when needed. The question on everyone's mind was simple and terrifying. What else had humanity kept hidden? The emergency council session reconvened 3 hours after the battle ended, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Fear had replaced panic, uncertainty had replaced desperation. Representatives from 40 species looked at Ambassador Hayes with new eyes, seeing not a minor player but potentially the most powerful being in the chamber. Nobody knew what to say. Admiral Torrens finally broke the silence. Ambassador Hayes, I believe we deserve an explanation. Earth has maintained a facade of weakness for 60 years while building weapons that surpass anything the galaxy has ever seen. Why the deception? His voice carried no anger, only weary curiosity, the question everyone wanted answered. Hayes stood, knowing this moment had been inevitable from the day humanity decided to build the carriers. We observed the galaxy's patterns, he began simply. Strong species dominate weak ones. Aggressive civilizations expand until someone stronger stops them. We saw the cycle repeat over and over. We decided to become strong enough to break that cycle. A small avian delegate spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. But why hide it? Why not announce your capabilities and deter aggression through visible strength? Hayes smiled sadly. Because visible strength makes you a target or forces you to choose sides. If we had revealed Horizon's Edge 40 years ago, every conflict in the galaxy would have demanded our involvement. We would have been forced to become conquerors or appear weak through inaction. The logic was sound but unsettling. Earth had been playing a game of galactic politics that nobody else even realized was happening. They had calculated that the best way to protect everyone was to appear incapable of protecting anyone. It was manipulation on a scale that made several species uncomfortable. How many of these vessels do you have? A delegate from the Farathi Union asked. The room fell silent, everyone waiting for the answer. Hayes met the question directly. 3 supercarriers, Horizon's Edge, which you've seen, Sentinel's Promise, currently patrolling the border regions, and Defiant Hope, stationed near Earth. Each is capable of projecting force across multiple systems. The implications hit like physical blows. 3 vessels, each capable of defeating fleets. Earth had built enough military power to dominate the entire galaxy if they chose. And what do you intend to do with this power? Admiral Torrens asked quietly. Everyone in the chamber leaned forward. This was the question that mattered most. We intend to do exactly what we did today, Hayes replied. Protect those who cannot protect themselves, stop aggressors before they can cause harm, and otherwise leave the galaxy alone to manage its own affairs. These carriers were never meant as weapons of conquest. They're shields, not swords. A reptilian representative hissed skeptically. You expect us to believe Earth built the most powerful military force in the galaxy purely for defensive purposes. That goes against every historical pattern we've observed. Hayes nodded. It goes against every pattern because we learned from watching everyone else's mistakes. We studied a million years of galactic history. We saw what happens when the strong abuse their power. We chose a different path. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. A technician burst into the chamber, his face pale. Sirs, we're receiving distress calls from the outer reaches, multiple systems under attack by an unknown force. Initial reports suggest it's the Dominion swarm. The chamber erupted into chaos. The swarm was a name spoken in whispers, a nightmare that haunted the galactic consciousness. A hive-minded species that consumed everything in its path, stripping worlds bare of resources and life. They had been dormant for 200 years, confined to uncharted regions. If they were active again, no fleet in the known galaxy could stop them. Hayes pulled out his communication device, his fingers moving rapidly. Admiral Torrens watched him. Ambassador, surely even your carriers cannot face the swarm. They number in the thousands, perhaps millions. Individual ships are weak, but their numbers, Hayes interrupted him, are irrelevant against coordinated defense. I'm recalling Horizon's Edge and repositioning Sentinel's promise. Defiant Hope will maintain position at Earth. You're sending 2 ships against the swarm? Someone asked in disbelief. Hayes shook his head. No, I'm coordinating a proper defense, but we'll need help. The swarm cannot be allowed to gain a foothold in populated space. He turned to address the chamber. I'm proposing an emergency alliance. Every species that can contribute ships do so. Earth will coordinate tactical operations. The room erupted in debate. Some species were eager to accept human leadership if it meant survival. Others feared placing themselves under Earth's command. The discussion became heated, voices rising as fear and pride clashed. Hayes let them argue for several minutes before speaking again. We don't have time for politics, he said firmly. The swarm doesn't negotiate, they don't stop, they don't care about your independence or pride. They will consume every living thing they encounter unless we stop them. Now who will stand with us? His voice carried absolute conviction. One by one, delegates stood. Admiral Torrens was first. The Vahari Concordat will commit our fleet. The Farathi Union followed, then the Crystalline Collective, then others. Within 10 minutes, 37 species had pledged their military forces. Only 3 abstained, choosing to flee rather than fight. Hayes nodded, satisfaction showing on his face for the first time. Good. All military commanders report to Tactical Room 7. We have 12 hours before the swarm reaches the next inhabited system. We'll use that time to prepare a defense that will make them regret waking up. The meeting dissolved as delegates rushed to contact their fleets. In orbit, Horizon's Edge began moving toward the new threat. Across the galaxy, Sentinel's promise changed course, its massive engines pushing it toward the outer reaches. At Earth, Defiant Hope remained on station but prepared for rapid deployment if needed. The 3 supercarriers were humanity's greatest secret. Now they would become the galaxy's greatest hope. A message arrived at the council station, intercepted by monitoring stations. It was a telepathic broadcast from the swarm's collective consciousness. The translation was simple and terrifying. We consume, we grow, we are eternal. Resistance is temporary. Your matter will join our matter. Your energy will join our energy. All life feeds the swarm. Hayes read the message and felt cold determination settle over him. The collective had been aggressive. The swarm was something far worse. They weren't warriors seeking conquest. They were a force of nature, stripping everything in their path. If humanity had built the carriers for any purpose, it was for threats like this. Now they would prove whether their philosophy of protection could stand against pure consumption. Tactical Room 7 had been transformed into a military command center within hours. Holographic displays showed fleet positions across 3 star systems. Representatives from 37 species crowded around planning tables, studying defensive formations. Captain Andrews stood at the center, coordinating deployment of forces that had never worked together before. The swarm doesn't think like military commanders, Andrews explained to the assembled officers. They don't have tactics or strategy in the traditional sense. They adapt in real time, learning from every encounter. Every drone shares information with the collective instantly. Kill 1,000 of them, and the next 1,000 will know exactly how you did it. A Vahari commander studied the sensor data. How do we fight an enemy that learns faster than we can adjust? Andrews pulled up historical records from Earth's archives. We fought something similar once, called an ant colony, overwhelming numbers, hive coordination, relentless advance. The key is not to fight individual units, but to attack their command structure. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. You're suggesting we find and destroy whatever controls the swarm, Admiral Torrens said slowly. Andrews nodded. Intelligence suggests they have a central bioconstruct, something that births new drones and maintains the hive connection. Destroy that and the swarm becomes disorganized, maybe even dies. A crystalline officer gestured at the holographic display showing thousands of swarm signatures. That construct will be at the center of their fleet, protected by everything. They have, even your supercarriers cannot reach it. Andrews smiled grimly. Not alone, but with a coordinated assault we create an opening. 3 supercarriers form a defensive triangle. Alliance fleet fills the gaps. We turn this into a battle of endurance. The next 6 hours were spent in frantic preparation. Ships from 37 different species had to learn to work as a unified force. Human tactical officers spread throughout the Alliance fleet, teaching coordination protocols. Communication systems were synchronized. Weapon frequencies were calibrated to avoid friendly fire. It was controlled chaos. Former collective officers volunteered their vessels for the fight. The acting commander approached Captain Andrews personally. My people brought shame to ourselves with our aggression. We request the honor of fighting alongside you. Andrews studied him for a moment, then extended his hand. Welcome to the Alliance. We're glad to have you. Horizon's Edge took position at the outer edge of the defense perimeter. Sentinel's Promise arrived 8 hours later, moving into position on the triangle's second point. Defiant Hope remained at Earth, but coordinated logistics and reinforcements. The 3 human supercarriers formed the anchor points of a defense spanning millions of kilometers. The swarm arrived exactly when sensors predicted. They didn't emerge from hyperspace in an organized formation. Instead, they simply appeared, thousands of bioships materializing across a vast area. Each vessel was grown rather than built organic technology that pulsed with life. They moved like a school of fish, individual ships following the collective's will. All ships hold formation, Andrews commanded across the Alliance network. Let them come to us, conserve ammunition, trust your training. The bioships advanced in waves, testing the defensive line. They didn't charge blindly but probed for weaknesses, sacrificing hundreds of drones to gather tactical information. The first wave hit the defensive line like a hammer. Alliance ships opened fire, and space filled with weapons discharge. Plasma, kinetic rounds, energy beams, and exotic weapons from dozens of species created a wall of fire. Swarm drones died by the hundreds, but more kept coming. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. Horizon's Edge's point defense network worked constantly, intercepting suicide drones that tried to crash. Into the carrier, the supercarrier's main batteries fired methodically, each shot calculated to maximize damage to multiple targets. Bioships exploded or went tumbling through space, but the swarm showed no concern for losses. They simply kept coming. On the bridge of Sentinel's Promise, Captain Rodriguez watched tactical displays with growing concern. They're adapting faster than expected, she reported to Andrews. Third wave is already showing resistance to our plasma frequencies. Andrews had anticipated this. All ships rotate weapon types every 15 minutes. Don't let them adapt to any single system. The battle settled into a brutal rhythm. The Alliance held its formation while the swarm threw wave after wave against them. Casualties mounted on both sides. A Farathi cruiser took critical damage and had to withdraw. A crystalline frigate lost engines and drifted helplessly until Horizon's Edge fighters evacuated the crew. Former collective vessels fought alongside former enemies, united by survival necessity. Hour 3 of combat brought a change. Sensors detected something massive at the center of the swarm fleet. a bioconstruct the size of a small moon pulsing with energy. It was spawning new ships constantly, growing them from its own mass and releasing them into battle. Captain Andrews stared at the readings. That's it. That's what we need to destroy. Sir, it's protected by at least 3,000 bioships, his tactical officer reported. We'd never reach it. Andrews considered their options. Every minute that construct operated, the swarm grew stronger. They needed a plan. Get me Captains Rodriguez and the Alliance command staff. I have an idea, but it's going to be risky. The plan was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. Horizon's Edge would push through the swarm fleet to reach the bioconstruct. Sentinel's Promise and Defiant Hope would maintain the defensive perimeter. The Alliance fleet would create a corridor, sacrificing themselves to give the Supercarrier a path. It was a desperate gamble. I'm not asking anyone to throw their lives away, Andrews told the Alliance commanders. But I won't lie to you, this will be costly, ships will be lost, people will die. But if we don't destroy that construct, the swarm will eventually overwhelm us anyway. He paused, letting them digest his words. I need volunteers. Every single commander volunteered, species that had been strangers 2 days ago now stood ready to die together. Former enemies pledged their ships without hesitation. The Alliance had forged something unprecedented in galactic history. Not fear-based cooperation, but genuine unity born from shared purpose. Preparations took another hour. Ships positioned themselves for the assault. Crews said their goodbyes. Medical bays prepared for casualties. Horizon's Edge powered up every system, drawing energy until the Supercarrier glowed with barely contained power. The time for planning had ended. Now came the time for courage. Horizon's Edge began its assault run with engines at maximum thrust. The 15-kilometer Supercarrier accelerated toward the heart of the swarm fleet like a battering ram. Bioships swarmed around it immediately, trying to overwhelm the carrier through sheer numbers. Point defense turrets fired continuously, creating a sphere of destruction around the vessel. The Alliance fleet moved in perfect coordination. Farathi cruisers formed the vanguard, their heavy armor-absorbing punishment meant for lighter vessels. Crystalline frigates used their advanced shields to protect damaged ships. Former collective destroyers provided covering fire. Every species contributed what they did best. Together, they carved a corridor through the swarm. Captain Andrews watched the tactical display as casualty reports flooded in. A Vahari destroyer exploded as bioships overwhelmed its defenses. 2 Farathi cruisers collided while evading swarm attacks, taking both ships out of the fight. A wing of fighters from 6 different species sacrificed themselves to destroy a cluster of bioships blocking Horizon's Edge's path. The cost was terrible, but they kept advancing. Sir, we're reading energy spikes from the construct, his tactical officer reported. It's preparing some kind of defensive measure. Andrews gritted his teeth. How long until we're in firing range? Another officer checked calculations. 3 minutes at current speed, but we're taking heavy damage. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, port side shield generators offline. The bioconstruct pulsed with malevolent energy, and suddenly hundreds of specialized bioships emerged from its surface. These were different from standard drones. Larger, heavily armored, equipped with weapons designed specifically to counter human tactics. The swarm had been studying Horizon's Edge since the battle began. Now it deployed its answer. New contacts are targeting our weapons arrays, Tactical reported. They're trying to disarm us before we reach firing range. Andrews made a decision. Divert all power from rear shields to forward batteries. Route secondary fusion cores to the main mass driver. We're firing everything we have in one salvo. Around Horizon's Edge, the Alliance fleet fought with desperate courage. Ships that should have withdrawn hours ago continued fighting on damaged systems. Crews that had lost half their numbers kept their vessels in formation. A former collective commander rammed his cruiser into a cluster of bioships, creating an opening for human fighters to exploit. His sacrifice would be remembered. 1 minute to firing range, Tactical announced. The supercarrier shuddered as bioships crashed into its hull, their suicide attacks finally overwhelming point defense in localized areas. Repair crews worked frantically to contain breaches. Medical bays overflowed with wounded. Engineering sections reported critical failures in multiple systems, but they were almost there. The bioconstruct seemed to sense the danger. More bioships poured from its surface, throwing themselves at Horizon's edge in waves. The corridor the Alliance had created began to collapse as swarm forces pressed in from all sides. Ships that had given everything had nothing left to give. The offensive was failing. Then Admiral Torren's voice came across all channels. Alliance fleet, emergency burn, all ships push toward the construct. Give Horizon's edge the seconds it needs. Every functional vessel in the Alliance fleet activated emergency thrusters, charging directly at the bioconstruct. It was a suicide run, but it bought precious time. Firing range achieved, Tactical called out. All weapons locked on target, power at maximum. Andrews took a deep breath. Fire everything, now. Horizon's Edge unleashed 40 years of human engineering in a single devastating salvo. The main mass driver fired its tungsten penetrator at 15% light speed. Every rail cannon discharged simultaneously. Missile batteries emptied their entire inventory. Energy weapons drew power until the carrier's lights flickered. The combined firepower crossed the distance in seconds. The tungsten penetrator hit first, punching completely through the bioconstruct's outer shell. Rail cannon rounds followed, tearing. Massive wounds in the organic structure. Missiles detonated deep inside, their nuclear warheads cooking the construct from within. Energy beams burned through vital systems. The bioconstruct screamed, not audibly but telepathically, a psychic wail of pain that every species with any psionic sensitivity felt. The massive organism began to collapse on itself, its ability to spawn new ships failing. Bioships throughout the fleet suddenly went dormant as their connection to the hive mind severed. All ships emergency retreat, Andrews commanded. The bioconstruct was imploding and the gravitational forces would crush anything nearby. Horizon's Edge reversed thrust, its damaged engines straining. The Alliance fleet scattered, everyone fleeing the dying construct's pull. Several ships didn't make it, caught by gravity and dragged into the collapsing mass. The bioconstruct's final moments were spectacular and terrible. It folded in on itself, matter compressing to impossible densities. A flash of energy bright enough to be seen across star systems marked its death. The shockwave that followed disabled every remaining bioship within 1,000,000 kilometers. The swarm was dead. Silence filled the communication channels as the survivors processed what had happened. They had won, but the cost had been staggering. 37 species had committed their fleets. Fewer than half those ships remained operational. Thousands of beings had died, but they had stopped the swarm. Captain Andrews opened a channel to all surviving vessels. This is Horizon's Edge to all Alliance ships. You fought with honor, courage, and unity. Every species here can be proud. We didn't just stop the swarm. We proved something more important. We proved that the galaxy's species can stand together. Thank you all. The council chamber, watching via long-range transmission, erupted in celebration and mourning simultaneously. Joy at survival mixed with grief for losses. Ambassador Hayes stood quietly, understanding that this battle had changed everything. The galaxy had seen what unity could accomplish. More importantly, they had experienced it. Over the following weeks, repair efforts became recovery efforts. Ships were salvaged, wounded were treated, dead were honored. The 3 human supercarriers coordinated relief efforts, their medical facilities and manufacturing capabilities helping rebuild damaged vessels, species that had fought. Together now worked together in peace. The Galactic Council reconvened 1 month after the battle. This time the atmosphere was different. Fear had been replaced by cautious optimism. Ambassador Hayes stood before them again, but now he wasn't just tolerated, he was respected. The alliance formed during the crisis needs to become permanent, he proposed. Not as domination, but as cooperation. Earth offers to share technology, coordinate defense, and train joint forces. In return, we ask only that you commit to mutual protection. The vote was unanimous. Even species that had abstained before now joined willingly. The Galactic Defense Initiative was born with the 3 supercarriers as its foundation, but all species as equal members. Military command would be shared. Technology would be exchanged. The galaxy was entering a new era. Years later, children across 100 worlds would learn about the day the swarm came and was defeated. They would hear how enemies became allies, how the weak protected the strong, and how humanity revealed its greatest secret not for conquest but for protection. The 3 supercarriers still patrolled, but now they were accompanied by vessels from countless species. Earth had given the galaxy a gift, not just military power, but the hope that unity was possible.